Even when I didn't understand everything that they were saying, they didn't understand everything that I was saying. I have things to learn from those who've been doing this longer. But let me tell you something. What they're saying about Gen Z is so far from the truth. They have a lot that they have to learn from me and from us. And so it was a sense of not, I shouldn't be here. It's my God, they need so many more of us to be here.
In today's world, how does a brand break through the noise and become iconic? Well, there's a complex marketing machine running behind all your favorite brand names that goes deeper than you could ever imagine. Join me, Jason Harris, co-founder and CEO of award-winning creative agency Mechanism, as I speak with leading experts about how to build an iconic brand. We'll pull back the curtain on how culturally relevant brand building and always-on digital work together to make brands famous and drive business results. Think of it as EQ meeting IQ. So let's fast forward our marketing minds on the Soul and Science podcast. If over the last few years you found yourself wondering how to truly connect with Gen Z, maybe as a brand or a creative or as a marketer, you're not alone and you're in the right place. Today's episode is all about cracking the code to reach this dynamic and influential generation. In this episode, we've got Ziad Ahmed, a 25-year-old entrepreneur who's making waves as the head of Next Gen at United Talent Agency, or UTA. Ziad's been at the forefront of the Gen Z conversation, from founding JUV Consulting in high school all the way to leading groundbreaking work at the intersection of content, community, and culture. He also runs ZCON, which is a Gen Z-focused conference. In today's episode, we're going beyond the buzzwords to uncover what really works when it comes to engaging with Gen Z. Ziad will challenge you to rethink how your brand connects with Gen Z, offering tips on speaking the language in a way that feels genuine. And the future of marketing isn't just about creating customers, but about fostering communities that resonate with Gen Z's values. And we'll talk with Ziad about helping brands not just join cultural conversations, but actively shape them, ensuring they stay relevant in a fast-evolving landscape. Let's dive right in and learn about the soul and science of Gen Z. We've chatted many times in the past, so this would be pretty free-flowing.
For sure.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, my friend. I'm thrilled to be here.
I know you started your company at school.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your origin story, how you got into marketing.
I mean, so long story short, in terms of my story, is I started a nonprofit when I was in 8th grade, built around social equality and social acceptance. And sort of through that, I found myself in a lot of rooms that I didn't know existed, where I was the youngest person in the room by 2-3 decades, and where I realized how often young people are being spoken about but not spoken to. And that didn't sit right with me. And I started JUV Consulting when I was a junior in high school, when I was 16, as this little idea that if folks want to reach diverse young people, perhaps they should work with diverse young people to reach us, and was felt uniquely privileged and positioned to do that, given that I had a bunch of friends around the world, and that I wanted to collectivize our power to hopefully shift the way that folks were talking about our cohort, right? And talking about us as a generation, because there was such a disconnect between what folks were saying were true about us and what I felt was true about us. And it really came from this political place of being in a lot of political conversations and a lot of nonprofit conversations where I really felt that disconnect was showing up. And then after we founded, it became a lot of marketing and more corporate and professional folks that reached out and were really eager for our services and for our insight and for our perspective. And so I really fell into marketing. I definitely was not and did not go to college for marketing. I ended up studying political science in school and never expected this to be my full-time job, let alone to employ full-time employees with children, let alone to eventually exit. None of that was sort of even on my radar as a possibility when I started this thing. And it's sort of been the most extraordinary 8.5 years now, and a few gray hairs to show for it since then.
When you started it in your junior year, JUV Consulting, who was the main audience for it?
Well, I started JUV because of a lot of experiences that I had, like in spaces like at the White House as a teenager, right? And because I'd started a nonprofit with nonprofit leaders, and it's a lot of those conversations where I became aware that there were people whose job it was to be youth experts many decades my senior, right? And I was really angry that phenomenon existed, that people were being paid to speak for us, but no one was being compensated amongst us to speak for ourselves, right? And that's really the paradigm that I wanted to shift. So originally, my thesis was that our audience would be a lot of those entities, whether political or nonprofit or otherwise. And then, as I said, it became more corporates and marketing professionals that started contracting us. But from an audience perspective, in terms of ourselves, even when I started Juve, even the vernacular around Gen Z was very nascent, right? Like, people my age thought of themselves as millennials because that was the word for young people, right? Like, now there's a headline every single day about Generation Z. That was not the case, right? In 2016, it was the very early days of Gen Z as a term even being used. And so part of this was also the formation of my own identity and amongst my peers to say, hey, this is who we are. We are the older end of Gen Z. Let us find power in that. And let's really help steer the conversation about ourselves. Anyone who was interested, right, in learning more about young people, which I originally thought would be more in political spaces, but ended up being marketing. And then the audience was also simultaneously my peers. So really say, actually, guys, we're Gen Z. And actually, that means there's a huge opportunity for us to really be leaders in that conversation because it's a new one that's being had right now.
In hustle culture now, there's a lot of talk about, is going to college worth it? And the value of, just starting a business without going to school. And do you really need school? You ended up graduating anyway.
Yeah, I did.
Was there a point where you're like, my business is taking off, I don't need to go to school?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay. But why did you graduate?
There was a few reasons. One, look, I'm a child of grandparents and parents who moved mountains for me to have the life that I have. My grandfather was born in a village without running water, and only through the power of education was my life able to be what it has been. And the sacrifice that my family put in was always for our education, right? And my family did not move across oceans for me to not finish my 4-year degree.
No, there's the answer.
But more than that, I also believe fundamentally in the power, not only in like formal education, but in learning from your peers. And I was much better at Gen Z marketing because I was immersed in Gen Z culture, right? I was a real student with my peers, and I learned so much about argumentation. I learned so much about people and anthropology, right? From being at school and being challenged in my thinking. And there was always this real duality between a college student being flown out to some like bougie resort conference where I'm like treated as this like young, exciting voice. And then I get back to the classroom and I'm, berated by my classmates for having holes in my argumentation and logic in my thinking, right? And that humbled me correctly, right? And I think made me a smarter and better leader, that I wasn't always in situations where I was the only young person that was being, exceptionalized, but instead I was also around a lot of other young people who put me in my place and challenged me in my thinking and immersed me in the ways of the world today. And I think that made me better. And I think that you learn as much in the classroom as you do in the hallway, right? And I think I learned so much in the hallway that has allowed me to navigate now corporate hallways much more effectively.
Do you hire people that didn't go to college?
Absolutely. We have hired a number of people that have not completed or did not go to college. Yeah.
Just really matters their expertise, passion, skill, experience.
We would say vibes and values over everything.
Vibes and values. I love that. What do you think makes you unique? What are you good at that most people aren't?
It's a hard question, my friend.
But you know the answer.
I think that I truly love to talk. I'm like a true extrovert. I get energy from other people. And like, I cannot have slept for 2 days, but you ask me to give a speech, you ask me to be in an engaging conversation. Like, I am awake and I am energized and I am alive and I am fired up and ready to go. And like, my true love for talking, I think, is what I've built my business and life around. Right? I have this job where I get to travel around and meet such interesting dynamic people and build relationships with the leading Gen Z thinkers and creators and advocates and then brand leaders and cultivate relationships between these folks and build these bridges and communities. And it is in that conversation, it is in that community building that I find so much joy. And in large part, that's also like what led me to UTA and the acquisition that I have now, been a part of and the way I was able to achieve is because UTA is similarly a company that I think is built on that premise of like relationships, right? Like UTA is a talent representation company that of course has its brand practice that works at brands, but fundamentally, like I love making friends and I love being in conversation, and I've sort of optimized my life for that.
Do you ever have imposter syndrome?
I've never experienced imposter
You've
syndrome.
never experienced that ever. Have you ever been in a room where you felt like you didn't have enough experience to be in?
I have definitely been in rooms where I've been very conscious of how much I have to learn, right? And I've also been very conscious that a lot of people there did not believe that I belong. But in any of my situations where I think a lot of other young people might have felt imposter syndrome, the reasons I did not were one, because I had a mom who like loved the hell out of me and told me that like I was amazing and like I was dumb enough to believe her, right? Like I like, like my mom loved me into the person that I am, right? In a way that I am so grateful for. But beyond that, I think that my mindset in a lot of these rooms was not, I'm the only person like me, I do not belong. It was, I'm the only person like me, so many more of us belong.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
Like not just for Gen Z, like I'm often the only Muslim, right? In a lot of rooms that I am in, I'm often the only progressive or a person of color or whatever it might be. And I think on top of that, to be frank with you, I think I entered a lot of rooms and it wasn't, and even when I didn't understand everything that they were saying, they didn't understand everything that I was saying, right? And so there was an understanding that, well, yeah, I have things to learn from those who've been doing this longer. But let me tell you something. What they're saying about Gen Z is so far from the truth. They have a lot that they have to learn from me and from us. And so it was a sense of not, I shouldn't be here. It's my God, they need so many more of us to be here.
You mentioned the UTA acquisition. And so my company got acquired in 2022. Your company got acquired in 2024. And I remember for me, that first year of transition was challenging. How has your role changed and your job changed, if it has changed?
I am really grateful at the outcome that we were able to arrive at. And I think that UTA is the perfect home for JUV Consulting, which is now the next gen practice of UTA. And my role for the most part, like my job is the same, right?
Are you still building JUV Consulting?
JUV Consulting doesn't exist anymore, right? We are the next gen practice of UTA.
Okay.
ZCON still exists, our conference, right? And like JUV Consulting is the next gen practice of UTA. We're the same team, same services, same vibes that are only now being empowered and bettered and propelled by the larger UTA platform and flywheel, right? And so it's been really exciting, right? To one, get to do what we do with more infrastructure and more support and more cultural connectivity, because UTA is at the center of every cultural conversation. And two, to get to learn new things, because historically we've been more in the marketing and advertising space, and getting to learn the entertainment side of the industry, right? And get to learn from my amazing, brilliant colleagues who are specialists in gaming and podcasting and traditional talent, and all of these things has been really fulfilling and intellectually stimulating. And so for the most part, my job is the same, with now I get to do bigger and better and bolder work because of the platform that we're a part of. And now I have a boss.
Do you feel less stressed now?
Yes, 150%. What I've been saying is it's more work, less stress.
More work, less stress. I think that's actually right. Yeah. You don't have to worry about payroll every month.
Not in the same way, right?
Yeah,
and right. I get to think more long term, and I get to take more of a deep breath and understand that I'm not in this alone. One way to look at it is I have a boss for the first time. Like another way to look at it is like I have more support and a partner than ever before, right? And like that has been really relieving, I think, and a welcome change at this juncture in my life.
Switching a little bit to Gen Z, can you give like a Cliff's Notes version of just a few significant differences? Yeah.
First things first, when we talk about Gen Z, we're talking about a generation that is the largest generational cohort in the world. We're talking about a generation that really has differentiated ourselves on a few key axes, in that the only thing that really differentiate generations is two things. What significant geopolitical moments happened during their lifetimes, and two, what technologies evolved during their lifetimes. For Gen Z, we've lived in a stage of almost continuous, tumultuous global current events that we're still seeing unfold in a very aggressive pace currently, right? And two, social media has been a first language that we speak, right? And understanding social media not as a tool for Gen Z, but instead as a language that we speak, that we are fluent in and native in, whether or not we choose to be quiet or loud, it is how we think and shapes the world around us in infinite ways. And that's for better and for worse, of course, but it is the truth of the matter. And I think what a lot of brand marketers get wrong is, much like with any language, when someone's a native speaker, you can usually tell, right? And when someone's not a native speaker, you can usually tell. And you have a lot of people who are trying to engage in spaces, but not actually getting the insight from those who are native to those spaces, right? And you can make an analogy here when a lot of corporations have tried to do global expansion. They've gone into markets and they failed because they failed to understand the cultural nuance of those spaces, either linguistically or otherwise. And there's a similar analogy here that a lot of brands fail to connect properly with Gen Z because you're trying to engage in languages, in spaces, and cultures without investing in empowering those native to those spaces as leaders to help curate or help build whatever you're trying to market, right? And so I think at a baseline, that's really important to underscore in this conversation. I think more tactically, some things that we're really talking about a lot in terms of Gen Z marketing is the world that we're living in, the physical and digital are not separable. We're living in a phygital world where the physical and digital are integrated. And more brands and more marketers need to understand what that means in practice. What I mean by that is, why do we not have more ring lights in stores? Why are we not incentivizing consumers to create UGC if we know that Gen Z likes when we add on a layer of content to existing IRL experiences and vice versa? I don't want a world that is entirely one or the other. I want a world that integrates the two seamlessly. And with this in mind, knowing that Gen Z lives in this moment that is characterized by an epidemic of loneliness, and that is no surprise to any person that young people are undergoing a mental health crisis, how are brands understanding the tools that we can employ to engage with a digital universe that ultimately creates more community and belonging? When what most young people are asking for is to say, give me more spaces that I belong, give me more relationships that make me feel whole. And so to me, there needs to be a pivot from brand to consumer relationships to saying, how are we creating relationships between our consumers, right? How are we actually building community such that people are building friendship, camaraderie, support networks, right? Through proxy of whatever we might be selling or convening around. And I think and those that are doing that right are those that are really winning, because ultimately at the end of the day, that is, I think, what most of us are looking for, right? Is community in a phygital world. And so we think of ourselves as a community first, phygital first agency. That's how we've oriented a lot of our services, obviously with Gen Z Voices at the core of that offering. And I think that is how the ecosystem needs to be thinking more so.
Don't you think all generations have that same need for belonging and community?
I think every person these days is just trying to get through the day without crying. I think that what makes us cry might differ, and I think the threshold for what makes us cry might differ.
And the way we build community is different.
Correct.
And the way we connect is different.
I do think that uniquely, Gen Z is experiencing some of the most extreme aspects of the things that we're talking about. The media has propagated more myths, right, than ever before for young people to believe that it is possible to have it all, right? And so I think that we are probably even more unfair to self than any generation prior, right? Because we have infinite standard of comparison, and that can be a really dangerous thing, but a really empowering thing in other ways, to know that there are more ways to live and to know that there are more people who look like us and sound like us than we ever would have thought. But certainly, yes, I agree with you that we all are itching for belonging, and we're all looking to just get through the day without crying. But I hope we can give a little bit of extra love to young people who need us.
Tell me about, I know ZCON's coming up in October. And so is that part of your idea of this physical digital world coming together? And tell me how you came up with the idea and what happens at ZCON.
Yeah. Well, so as you know, Mr. Jason, I have often been at these corporate conferences and been maybe the youngest person in these rooms by a considerable margin. And I've oftentimes been frustrated that there are conversations about Gen Z with no Gen Zers on them, right, as a part of them. I've been doing this for 8.5 years, and that's still the case. There's still so many conversations on the power of young people, but very little empowering of young people. And ZCON is really a response to that by saying, no, we're going to take the microphone back, right? And we're going to create a forum on our own terms and unthink and rethink the conference experience. And so it's the first major conference with only Gen Z speakers, also really commemorating the last 8 years, the community that we've built, right? And honoring and celebrating the community that we built. Like, we feel so lucky that we are in community with the leading Gen Z changemakers and thought leaders and celebrities, but also the leading Gen Z brands and CMOs and CEOs who care a lot about this next generation. And so bringing all these folks together that we feel so uniquely we've built this community around, and saying, let's put Gen Zers on stage. The first major conference, only Gen Z speakers, and let's not just stop there. Let's really rethink the conference experience. Instead of a break, let's have recess, where I have a CMO hula hooping next to a 19-year-old activist. Instead of a party, let's have prom, right? And instead of just talking about Gen Z's values, let's have a day 2 of the day of action with nonprofit partners where people are actually living Gen Z's values, right? And really rethinking what the conference experience looks like to actually live the values that we think are so near and dear to our hearts, right? And to the cohort that we are trying to empower at the conference's hearts, right? And we brought it to LA last year, and it was magical and beyond our wildest imagination. And we brought it to Cannes a few months ago, ZCON, and it was extraordinary. And so it's coming to New York in October. And we couldn't be more excited about it. I don't think there's anything else like it out there. It's a decisive convening on the present and the future. And if folks are actually interested in the power of young people, it starts with empowering young people and it starts with listening to young people. And so this is a conference for leaders to come, to sit, and to do just that.
Can anyone attend? Anyone listening to the podcast
Can go to zcon.xyz and they can request an invite. And we hope to curate a really dynamic group of people that include students, CEOs, CMOs, change makers, creators.
Would you say ZCON is one of the proudest achievements that you've done? Because I feel like if I look at your history and really how the company started, it was about representation and being in those conversations, trying to get into those rooms. And this is really a manifestation of creating the room for other people to get into.
Yeah, I would say unquestionably. It's like, it feels like the culmination of all my work, right? I also think that one aspect of it that we're really excited about, that we hope this year comes to fruition even more so, is when I talk to a lot of young people who work at corporations, one of their biggest complaints often is that people go on stages and take credit for their work, right? And people pass over them and undermine their achievements and their efforts all the time. And I talk to a lot of companies who tell me, they can't give equity to every employee, blah, 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 this, that.
The philosophy is wait your turn, right?
Wait your turn, right? And what I always say is, okay, and people are going to take a different turn out of there, right? Right. In the interim, and also where you can't make a lot of structural governmental governance change in an organization, these big corporations, you can pass the mic, right? And still, we have a lot of companies not doing that. And what we hope to see is our corporate sponsors and partners to platform their young Gen Z stars to be speakers at ZCON, to give them their first opportunity to have that mic, to take credit for their own work, because that has why my employees, I have a decent track record of I have the same leadership team that I've had for 4 years, right? And I've, had my employees stick around for quite a while for the most part. And I think that those who stay because they are grateful to be at a place that passes them the mic, right? And so what I'm really hopeful is that ZCON becomes that place where I was so privileged and lucky to get a mic passed me when I was so young. If ZCON can create an infrastructure and architecture for that to happen to more people, and then hopefully that inspires change across the ecosystem, that's pretty awesome, right? And so absolutely, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of and most excited for.
What's next for you and your new next gen practice at UTA, or your evolved next gen practice at UTA? Do you have some interesting things coming up?
Well, ZCON, obviously, one. But I think also integrating into UTA marketing is really exciting to us, right? Our pitch historically has been, don't talk about Gen Z, talk to Gen Z, right? UTA marketing, the practice that we sit under, which is the part of UTA that works at brands, help them connect with culture, their pitch has been, don't talk about entertainment, talk to entertainment, right? And they've really trailblazed in the space of product placement and mainstream entertainment and branded content and talent alliances and narrative strategy, and really helping to be cultural guides for brand clients into the entertainment space. And I think collectively what we're sort of positioning is, don't talk about culture, talk to culture, right? That We know that Gen Z is a critical part of culture. We know that entertainment is a critical part of culture. How do we develop an offering that holistically, right, allows folks to talk to folks who are closer to the source, right, of what they're trying to get to and what they're trying to reach, and to not just buy media in interruptive ways, but could connect with audience in integrated ways, right? Showing up where folks are already entertained, showing up where folks want to be entertained. And I think uniquely UTA sits at the intersection of every major story that's being told.
Right. Like where those brands fit into those stories and those experiences and that entertainment, they have to fit in
organically, right?
They have to fit in organically.
And I'm excited about that future for the industry. And I think we're all working on things in that regard I think that obviously paid and linear are changing every single day. And folks are leaning in more to, well, how do I shift some of my spend to things that are more organically already in culture?
Partnerships, earned media, entertainment. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. And so I think that me learning more about those spaces and and working on this really holistic joint offering is really exciting to me. And I think that on top of that, getting to tap into the fact that UTA represents the people that I most want to learn from as I embark on this journey of bettering my own practice and bettering my own business, from the producers, to the news hosts, to the storytellers of our generation, from the authors, right, to the athletes and everything in between. And so that is really exciting to me because I want to be a sponge. And I always say, like, you can only be a good writer if you're a good reader, right? Like, I can only be a good marketer from a good anthropologist, right? And I can only be a good entertainment guide if I am really culturally consuming entertainment, but also talking to the thought leaders in that space. And so for me, what I'm excited about is to continue to dive into that space. And I feel like there's no better place to do that.
Do you have a mantra or a quote that you always think about, or that you live by, or that you come back to?
I don't know that it exists in the world or where I picked it up from, but if there's one thing that I could change about the world, what I've said is this notion that because I don't see it, it doesn't exist. And I think a lot of problems in society stem from this notion that you have to personally see or experience a problem to reckon with that it's real. I think a lot of people look at the world and they say, well, it's not raining where I am. Why are you guys whining about the rain? Right? And like, just because it's not raining where you are does not mean it's not thundering over there, just 50 miles over. We shouldn't have to watch people be completely sopping to believe them when they tell me it's raining where they are. And we shouldn't have to experience the rain ourselves and to experience that the rain is real and happening. And folks can take from that analogy whatever it conjures from them, but to me, it centers me and why it's so important that we elevate voices from places where it might be raining right now, so that folks come to understand, shit, I didn't realize it was thundering so bad over there.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I can lend them my umbrella, right? Or maybe they could use some sunshine, right? And in the world that I want to live in is one where we have that empathy and we have that connectivity to say, it shouldn't be raining on any of us. And if we can all work together to create a world with more light, I think that's a win.
So that's it. Create a world with more light. I would sum it up as that. All right. I got 3 more questions for you. I do an inspiration of the week every podcast. So this is where I'll share something that's inspired me this week, and then you share something. I'll go first so you can think about yours. But what has inspired me is I fucking love watching the Olympics, first of all. You know, the world we live in today is one that when I watch the Olympics, it seems unnatural when you see competitors celebrating together, regardless of the flag they wear. They celebrate each other's victories. They're cheering for each other while they're watching their competitor do something amazing, which even means it might move them off the podium. They congratulate each other. They hug after a race, even when they lose. To me, the best athletes in the world in the most stressed situation shows the human connection in all of us. And it seems unnatural because of the world we live in today. And even though we're a global community, it usually feels like we're out for ourselves. And I just think the world can learn so much from that Olympic spirit. It struck me as odd that I felt, this is weird. And then I really thought about it and I was like, well, that's the way the world should be, but the world isn't that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are having that moment of seeing the Olympic torch and feeling the light on all of us. And I've seen a lot of TikToks of folks being like, I can't even watch without bawling my eyes out. Doesn't matter who wins. I know someone's going to win. Just watching someone win makes me cry.
That's amazing.
Because I think there's also the consciousness of how much work went into that, right? Like people devote their entire lives to it, and watching their victories, I think and them celebrate each other's victories, I think is uniquely inspirational. I certainly agree.
What's inspired you recently?
Well, I'd be remiss to not mention that, like, I'm Bangladeshi. Young people have raised their voices in Bangladesh, and regime change just occurred. And
I mean, that's perfect for our conversation.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times people like to undermine the power of young voices and undermine what is possible when we say we are being reimaginative. And I think I am Bangladeshi, and watching young people in the face of draconian measures continue to show up and show out and demand better for our country has been nothing short of inspirational. And I sincerely hope, God willing, inshallah, that it paves a better Bangladesh forward. Because I think the people deserve that.
I think it's amazing, actually. What's a lesson that you've learned recently? Mine is I'm rekindling my kind of hustle on the power of pitching ideas that aren't on the page. Like, you're not waiting for a brief, just an idea you have, and you go out and you make it happen, and it actually works. So that's one lesson, like proactive pitching. What's a lesson that you have recently?
Being at UTA, I'm also like learning a lot of like systems and processes that are new to me, like from Hollywood, from corporate, whatever it might be. I am a Gen Zer who hates calling on the phone. I text.
Right.
This company loves to just pick up the phone and call someone.
I mean, that's the agent lifestyle right there.
That's the agent lifestyle. And I think it has been really illuminating to see how much more productive we've been, both being in the office and getting to synergize more often, but also like the magic that can happen from being like, oh, that person might be a good person to call about this, and just picking up the phone and calling them and getting it done right there, right then, instead of waiting for a reply by emails for 4 days. And so
I love that. Or texting them and say, can you chat? And
yeah.
then getting on the phone.
No, but like they don't even do that.
All right.
Like they don't even like no.
That's great. They just call?
They just call.
And people answer their phone?
Yes. Yes. That's like the whole culture is like,
oh my God.
Like we have a whole like system of how it's like a lot of people. I'll be like, can we schedule? I'm like, no, I'll just give you a call at some point today. And then and also like on our like little Zoom thing, you can see if someone's in a call or not presently.
Dude, that's wild.
And so anyways, but that has been
all right.
And when you're in a company where there's like 2,000 people who are all at the center of culture, like meeting with such incredible people and moving and shaking, it's so helpful to be like, hey, my client has this idea for something in podcast, something in gaming, something in music. And I just pick up the phone and be like, hey, have you heard of this? What are your thoughts on this? And just being able to get it done.
So it's changed the way you work a little.
Yeah, 100. Like I'm definitely more like, okay, I'll just call you.
I assume when I call someone, they're never going to answer because
me too, but they always do.
No,
but like I usually do pick up my phone. If I'm not on a call and I see someone's name that I know personally, I pick up the call. You know what I mean? Like I usually assume it's important if someone's calling.
All right.
You know?
Well, one lesson is start calling people.
Yeah, and so that is the lesson. And I also read something like that was like the most successful people I know are the most responsive.
That's true.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think this is a part of that.
All right. I love that. I learned something there. All right. Last question. Then I'll let you go. Double dog dare. We dare our guests to try a new tactic or a new strategy or something they normally don't do. Mine is even someone like me who's been in the business for 20 plus years.
How's that possible? You're a Gen Zer.
Well, at heart I am, but not on my passport. Even when, I've been in the business for a long time, always ask when you don't know something. And if you don't know something, I started doing this, like there's some media term I don't know. I schedule a meeting and try to ask the media person, wait, can you walk me through this? Which I dare people to be more curious and ask more questions and don't act like you know something when you don't, because people are happy to explain things to you and never stop learning. That's my double dog dare. What is yours for this week?
Well, let's connect to something I said earlier today, right? Which is most people who might be listening, I want you to ask yourself, when is the last time you had a conversation with a young person who wasn't your family or wasn't your employee, right? And if the answer is not recently, I challenge you to change that, right? To talk not at, but to talk with a young person about something you might disagree on, right? There's a lot of discourse about politics right now and where young people might differ from older generations or whatnot. Ask them, right? I think there's also sometimes a lot of assumption of like, they don't know what they're talking about. You might be surprised, right? And vice versa, right? We might be surprised. And so I think that is where I value, right, that Jason and you and I have had really interesting and nuanced conversations about our differing worldviews. And then I can have that same conversation with a younger peer of mine and learn from their perspective. And my worldview gets to be enriched by both of those conversations, right?
Go learn about the rain and learn about the sun.
Exactly.
All right.
Beautifully said.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
for
you,
your
my
time.
friend.
I always love talking to you.
And
I can't wait to
likewise.
chat with you more. And I'll see you before, but I'll also see you at ZCON this year.
You're the freaking best. So much appreciation for you, my friend. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Soul and Science, and we'll see you next week. Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira, with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris. At Mechanism, we build iconic brands with soul and science. The soul is culturally relevant brand building, and the science is the always-on marketing activities that drive the bottom line. Learn more at mechanism.com.